All right. Good. Good morning, everybody. Great to see so many of you here already. This, wonderful Tuesday morning. Really looking forward to the panel today. But yeah, before we get into the discussion, I think it would be really good to have a very short introduction of our panelists. So how about we start with that? A very short intro from you, or in terms of what organization you represent, your focus, and maybe one interesting thing, what is the hottest thing in food tech right now? Paulina, how do we start from there?
All right. Hi. Thanks for having me. So I'm Paulina, one of the partners in Maki VC. We are a seed stage VC firm based out of Helsinki, investing primarily in the Nordics, but with an open mandate. So technically, you can invest anywhere, writing checks up to 3 million euros, and pretty broadly across what we call deep tech and front-driven companies. That being said, food tech has definitely been an area of interest for a long time. We have plenty of food tech companies in our existing portfolio and looking to do more. Interesting area, I'd say use of AI in food innovation. Happy to share more light on what I mean by that later, but I think that's an avenue that is super interesting.
Absolutely, looking forward to hearing more on that and a few of the other questions that we are following up. And also congratulations on the Maki Fund.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, we announced our new fund just last week, third fund of 100 million euros.
Yes. And how about this?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. I think it's my fourth time here at TONIC, and I think we change location every time, but this is a very great new gig. So I'm Louise. I'm relatively new to the Nordic Food Tech VC team. Originally trained food scientist, but never really made it into the lab. And I think combining my technical background with finance actually to create impact, have been the great thread in my career for the past decade. So Nordic Food Tech VC, we do what's actually in the name. We do deep food tech, solving the big underlying problems in the food systems. We do early stage companies focusing on the Nordics. We are actually fully invested out of Fund 1. Just a few more announcements to be made in the next couple of months, and then we are good. So actually, and hopefully we can, come up with our Fund 2 in the beginning of next year.
Yeah, wonderful to have you again. Fourth time or the fifth time at TONIC?
Yeah, probably, I think.
Yeah, and you're also judging the pitching competition, right?
Yes.
Yeah, looking forward to hearing more on that one. And how about Matthias?
Thanks a lot for having me, first of all. And I'm from ECBF. We're a German growth stage fund investing in everything related to bioeconomy. That's 4 verticals: food tech, ag tech, bioindustrials, and packaging infrastructure. So I'm representing our food tech team today. We're investing across Europe in Series A, Series B, where we can buy tickets of 5 to 10 million. We invest when there's little to no technology risk, and most of our fund goes towards scaling the commercial side of the business. Yeah, I think that's us in short.
Wonderful. Great to have you all on the stage. Maybe we can start with a very generalistic question in terms of what's happening in the food sector. Maybe discussing in terms of food industry itself is such a dynamic sector, so many different aspects included on it. Maybe starting with Paulina, what are the, let's say, the common challenges and trends that you see in the current food tech space, and then how does that sort of affect your investment approach towards it?
Well, I think maybe one thing to mention, I think on a macro level, this is maybe a little bit obvious as well, but of course at the moment food manufacturers are definitely trying to balance out quality with value, and there has been obviously inflation at the retail level, and consumers are demanding lower prices, or at least not increasing prices, and then that obviously then affects the rest of the value chain as well. For instance, when evaluating startups who are maybe developing some of the constituent parts of the end products, then obviously price point is a big evaluation there, as in how does that fit within the context of the whole value chain. So that's definitely something that's top of mind for us when evaluating new cases.
Louise, how about you?
Can you repeat the question, just because the sound up here is really bad,
Yeah.
so we can't actually hear each other?
Sort of like, now, of course, the food industry itself is such a diverse sector. Kind of like when you are looking at a VC, what are the common, let's say, challenges and the trends that you see at the moment in terms of food industry? And also, has that affected, or has that changed, or has that kind of created how you approach when you are kind of like funding the new startups?
Yeah, of course. I think in this room we are all, breathing the food system. So I'm not preaching for a very involved public today. I think we have seen this kind of hype cycle, and we're not. I think we're just going back to normal right now, which means a lot more, fair valuations and more traction in the team that we evaluate. But we also keep focusing on the impact part. So that's kind of the underlying trend that kind of made everybody goes into food tech 5 years ago. The factors are still there. It's still an industry ready for investment and very under-financed actually. I think some of the hardest part that we are looking into is attracting senior talent. Because we need a lot of the food system solutions are in the biotech field, and we're competing with biotech talent.
Yeah. All right, and just to follow up on that one to Matthias, in terms of impact and sustainability, something that I think CDF is definitely looking into, right, when you're looking into the new startups. What do you think on that overall kind of like approach?
Yeah, we're an Article 9 fund, so it's plain and simple. It's a must-have.
Yeah.
So the ESG requirement is ever present, and it's first screening tool we apply to any business. Is it actually improving the world and making it a better place? We're specifically focused on carbon reductions or avoidance. So yeah, that's really important to us. I think on the other question and how I see this also, food is really, really difficult to do because it takes time.
Yeah.
Way more time than other sort of technology benefits because it's so emotional. What we eat is not like changing your web browser or your AI note taker. It's cultural, and it's what are you used to cooking with your kids or with your family at home. So the time to develop a food tech company is just way longer than a lot of investors maybe thought like 5-10 years ago. And that comes down to valuations, right? We need low valuations throughout the value chain. Bringing costs down, for example, just to take one example, what takes time. So you might have an amazing product, as you said, price is really important, and scaling up a technology within food to make the cost of use really competitive just takes time. And then you need to convince the rest of the value chain to include the product in your retail shelves or let consumers buy it, or if you're an ingredient, you need to be replaced in existing sort of formulations, etc. The list goes on. I don't want to sort of lecture around it, but it just means that it's a lengthy process.
Yeah, definitely lengthy process. Maybe,
And also, we are also in a sector where politics is a big part of it. So we are actually not competing on the real price of goods.
Yeah.
So we are competing with the subsidized price. So there's a lot of things going on. We're not just the food system. We can't just solve it with food tech and biotech. We also need to solve the infrastructure and politics and the whole consumer behavior.
Yeah, maybe we'll also look into a bit more about the external factors that are overall affecting the investment and the growth and everything. But maybe we can still stick in terms of the startups. For example, let's follow up with Louise in terms of. You mentioned a bit about the impact, a bit about sustainability and aspect. When you're looking into startups, what are the biggest challenges that they're facing right now from the early stages and also when they're scaling up?
I think first and foremost, every case is different.
Yeah.
And you need a new set of expertise and skill set to evaluate each case. So that's one thing. Early stage is probably the lack of most challenging part would definitely be to have is there to double check if there is an industry interest. are you really solving a problem that people are willing to buy your solution? I think that's some of the hardest challenges at a super early stage. And then of course, then there's the team. Is this a team that can make it fly? And do we have the right skill sets? So normally we see a lot of researchers. We really love the research-based startups. So we see a lot of researchers, and we definitely need the commercial skill set. But when to onboard the commercial skill set, when you look into 3 more years in the laboratory, so that's kind of some of the things that we are challenging the startups that we work with.
Yeah, what about Paul?
I think one of the challenges that we at least see and come across with our portfolio and companies that we talk to is the fact that we overall obviously invest in deep tech companies, and within food we also invest in many of the food tech companies who were doing some deeper tech and maybe capex heavy things, and there is a little bit of in terms of funding, for some of these companies, it might be tricky to kind of get across that stage where you are kind of still not showing commercial traction, but you have to get your first of a kind production facility up and running, and you're not necessarily kind of the most interesting case for the traditional banks or some of those types of players who might be funding you a bit further down the stream when you have the commercial traction. So kind of how to get across that big value, if you will, is a real problem, I think. And I think personally that we should see more of the VCs also doing some of the real things and some of the capex heavy investments in the very early stages to actually see these real innovations that get forward, not just plain vanilla software.
Yeah. What about Matthias? You've quite many companies in the portfolio, and I think this illicit plant just received the kind of new financing for 45 million. So maybe if you could still dive into some of the challenges startups might face early on, and also later on the later stages.
Yeah, I'm going to repeat what he did. Prior to EasyBev, I worked at an early stage fund investing from pre-seed, seed, and onwards. And I would say building out the team in the right phases is really difficult for a food tech startup to do, because eventually you need to make that switch from an R&D heavy team to a more commercially focused team, and maybe also hire someone that knows how to scale up industrial production, for example. And doing that in the right phases is just inherently difficult. And that also ties into what talent pool is available, etc. On the CapEx side, in EasyBev, we have predominantly invested in CapEx companies, actually, so manufacturing and production companies. And there, the biggest challenge for the late stage companies is margins. Getting down the margins and also having a growth rate that is compatible with a venture return expectation. So how do you actually do that if you're building a factory? So I think that's super difficult. Some of I really listen to this too quite.
Yeah, wonderful. And also, Paulina, just getting back to the previous point that you mentioned, kind of like as a generalist VC, of course, you have the deep tech angle, and you also have the food tech angle. For example, any kind of like a food tech startup, who do they should reach out to? Should they reach out to really category-focused VCs, for example, NFT, or should they reach out to, for example, a more generalistic VC who also have a bit of understanding on the other aspect also? What do you think?
I'm probably a bit biased to answer this question, given that we are generalist, but I think so. I think there are a lot of the generalist VCs who are like saying that they are looking into food tech and they are investing into food tech, but as I kind of hinted towards, there are also a lot of investors who look for those maybe a bit more plain vanilla software-related food tech companies. So I think from the founder's perspective, you kind of have to just look into each individual firm and assess whether they actually are focused on software, would they touch hardware and so forth, and kind of navigate it through that.
What about Louise?
As a niche and specialist investors, I definitely think that you should go with a specialist. But having said that, I think in the early stages where you will need it as a startup, and when you work as an investor with your startup in, for instance, support or whatever advisory role you have, I think we bring a lot of know-how and expertise and network into the company that's probably not needed later stage, or where you can look at more, more broader terms of upskilling or industry benchmarking, and how to build a bigger company. But in the early stages, I think niche VCs really have a role to play. But you can also look at that when you form your consortium as a startup. Make sure that you have a broad skill set on board. Some of them are very good at the industry contact. It could be a strategic, or it could be a niche investor, and somebody could basically be from the more commercial side going forward. So I think we can look at your consortium instead of looking at a sole investor.
What about Matthias?
100% agree. And not being sort of too shameless about advertising EasyBet, but a lot of our LP base are large corporates in the food space, for example, or whatever the other verticals are. So if we speak to an ingredient business, and we can actually take them in front of the Nestlé team who's doing product development, that's really, really valuable to the startup. Even if it's relatively further ahead compared to like pre-seed, right? Same goes for taking a startup to the legal group and showing about, okay, what's actually moving on your shops, and getting that insight directly from potential customers is very different from a more generalist VC who might know about building and funding startups, or might not know about the intricacies of this particular region. What are they eating? What is happening here in one part of Germany, for example, region stuff. And all of those insights and that feedback that it creates between the VCs, LPs, and the portfolio is, for me, a really big value in addition to just the money, right?
Yeah.
So I do think that specializing as a VC is important.
I think so. Definitely agree that there needs to be more than money added to the table. That being said, I wouldn't generalize as much.
Yeah.
Maybe I think generalist VCs also have some special skills within their teams, and there might be more specialized investors within these generalist firms who happen to know of a particular industry, and then it always just, I think, really comes down to the founder and what they think they are strong at and what they think they need support at. So, for instance, we see a lot of food tech founders who actually do know the industry well, and they might have connections in this industry. So access to the customer, for instance, is not the issue necessarily, but then they actually don't have experience in terms of how to build a company, how to scale the team, how to think about funding going forward, and so forth. And in that context, for instance, then you might want to bring someone on board who has a bit more generalist view as well. So again, it's never, I think, as black and white, and it always depends on case.
Yeah, case by case basis, and also very much depending on what the startups are really looking for. Whether it's so based on that, they can go to a very generalistic VC or go to directly to the sector focused VCs. So.
But also, thing I would also like to add that some of the most valuable that we bring to our portfolio is actually the peer-to-peer within our portfolio. So there's a lot of building up a lot of knowledge within our portfolio that can be shared easily between, because there's a lot of trust between the founders in our portfolio. So that's also some of the things that we bring.
Right. Pauline, anything to comment? I feel like you're about to comment something.
No, I think this is an if you work, and I think we both should exist. Ideally, co-invest, etc.
Co-exist. All right. Good. Maybe we can also move on towards something that we discussed a bit earlier before, some sort of like external factors. We discussed a bit about political aspect, and maybe Matthias, from your side, what are some of the external factors that let's say that are affecting or that are kind of like challenging the food tech investments?
Yeah, it was mentioned already by you, but regulation, right? It's not an even playing field. There's so many subsidies going into the meat and classical meat and dairy industries that it's really hard for new products to reach the shelf at a relevant price point. So I think for me, that's probably the really overarching sort of challenge with regulations. I think it comes from a good place around food security in Europe, but maybe it's time to update it slightly. I think a little bit more in terms of how can we also support like upcoming part-based products, for example. We're doing some stuff in Denmark at the moment in terms of restructuring how we use our land. I think that is an interesting approach, carbon tax, etc. So there's a lot of good stuff happening. but much more to be done if it's to be more level playing field, I think, on food products. But if it's software, hardware, it's probably a little bit more straightforward, but food products in particular are difficult.
Yeah. What about Pauline?
Completely echoing that. I think there are a lot of obviously external factors in Europe and in comparison to maybe then some other regions. One to mention is, for instance, that for some of the alternative protein cases, the regulation around it is quite tricky in Europe. And so, for instance, the novel food approval is typically a long and expensive process in Europe versus it's perhaps easier for some of these companies in the States. So, for instance, in our portfolio, a chicken-free egg producer Onego, they kind of straight up decided they are going to go to the States and are building their first production facility there due to this regulation where basically the ingredient that they were using was deemed as being genetically modified, although actually the end product is kind of identical in the molecular structure to the actual egg white, and hence they would need to go through the novel food approval process, which is again super lengthy. So it just makes sense to go to the US, and that's definitely, I think, a loss to Europe, and something should be done.
Yeah. What about what about now if they move to the States and have the operation there, but if they want to move back the operation to Finland or operate in Finland, what kind of do they still have to go through those challenges in terms of having the paperwork done, or?
Yeah, so basically you just have to have an approval to have a product on the market. Obviously they can have kind of their operations, I guess, up and running wherever, and they did have a team in Finland and so forth. But now they are building out a team and a production facility in the US where they get their product quicker to the market and they get to the revenues quicker than in Europe or in Finland. And I guess it's obviously left to be seen at what point it makes sense to then kind of actually go through the process here.
Yeah. Great. Maybe continue with Louise on this. What are your thoughts on the challenges?
Because there's a lot, but I completely agree with Pauline.
One or two main ones.
Yeah. We need to solve the politics and the whole regulation space because it's just taking too long, basically. And we will lose a lot of companies up here in the Nordics, but also in Europe as well, in terms of market entry. They would definitely choose, other places to place their headquarters if we not solve the problem. Another thing I would like to add is the lack of funds like Matthias's. So there is not a lot of growth capital within the food space, and that's where the journalistics has been playing. And I think luckily a lot of the food companies, they also chip into the health space and the climate space, but it's still the first of its kind investment. So we definitely need a lot more growth capital.
Wonderful. Great. We are almost at the end of the panel discussion, but before we go into the Q&A from the audience, maybe last question in terms of the future of food tech overall in the next 5 to 10 years, maybe starting with Pauline. What do you think is going to be the next big thing that people are not aware of?
So I'm going to go back to what I said in the beginning. I think AI in the context of food innovation is interesting, and let's see what we're gonna see there. But I think there are companies who are looking to, or are incorporating, or are looking to incorporate AI tools into their existing processes, whether that's new ingredients or new flavor development, new product development, new product variant development, or the actual production. And I hope that there will be a bit more efficient and smarter processes going forward, which I think could also then contribute to the fact to what I was kind of referring to, that everyone's quite price sensitive across the value chain. So we should come up with ways to be more efficient in the actual operations of these food producers.
What about this?
I think we would be speaking a lot more about food security, securing food for all. If we look at the numbers, we have actually the numbers are going in the wrong direction. So more and more people are actually in starvation or in hunger due to geopolitical stuff. And yes, there will be quick fixes, but we also need to really look at the whole food system. I think that will be our focus, basically, to solve the global food system with some tech fixes, but also trying to get a bit more advocacy around the whole politics.
Wonderful. What about Matthias?
It's really difficult, so I'm trying to keep my mind open and not to be too focused on a particular path of innovation, but rather see what actually goes with the hype cycle and what comes out there, and then we can make bets on. I think both of you said are probably quite true. We don't see a lot of startups addressing the challenge of disadvantage, for example. I wish we would see more of that, because that's a real challenge that we're losing out on land. But apart from that, it's almost impossible to pinpoint one winning technology or actually. So, yeah, hope for the best and watch out for those who actually consume them.
Yeah, I think at the end it's always the best entrepreneurs who actually then define the most interesting areas.
Wonderful. That's a great way to end the session. But yeah, before we do that, about 5 to 10 minutes of if anybody has any questions to our panelists. Yes, we have. There, do we have a mic?
Yes, we have a mic.
Thank you.
Question?
Yes.
Over here.
Over there.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for a very inspiring discussion. Really liked it. Here to see your point of view from the Finnish perspective. We're coming from Austria and also investing into food startups and have an accelerator there solely on FMCG. So one question which came up a few times was the regulations, EU, novel food and all of that. We are a specific question towards that. We're working on CBD in edibles and maybe the THC in edibles and all of that. Don't you see that the guys in Brussels kinda drag everything out in order to keep their business model going and basically hindering our young startups in going forward? Is that something you see as well?
Was that a question or a comment?
I can comment I hope that they're not. I have pretty high faith in government, also in Brussels, that it's not on purpose. I think the regulation is doing a lot of good stuff for us in Europe. If I contrast to the US, for example, in terms of food regulation, it's just a little bit too slow. So we wish it was more nimble and wish we could bring products to market faster. It's a huge shame that companies are moving to US for the first part rather than the EU. So I think there's tons of ways we can improve it, but I'm also a little bit cautious of this because I would rather have what we have today than the US model, if I put it like that. Maybe that's a little too naive, but maybe slightly positive. Yeah.
All right. Any more questions from the audience? Okay, we have one more there.
Hello. Yeah, thank you for the good discussion. My question is about future trends. How do you see it? So on one side, we can go for the mass production, automation. So for the basically automation for mass production, and then we go another specialty foods like organic, healthy. How do you see it from your side? Which are the trends? Which way to go? Because it's one or another. Because on the healthy side, you cannot go fully automated because, anyways, there is some challenges with the quality, quantity, and everything so related. So, how do you see it on your side?
I definitely think that we can combine the two sides. I don't see it black or white. I think that in the beginning of the first wave where we invested into the alternative protein space, we looked for volume. We looked for, did it have the right amino acid compositions and stuff like that? Was it, fulfilling our needs? But now we also look a bit more into the taste and the structure and all that kind of stuff that actually made it into a complete meal, or that actually will, get the consumer to buy it once again. So I think the barrier for enter the, is a bit higher now than it was 5 years ago, because now it's not just about, ticking the boxes of the nutritional value. Now it's also about the taste and the texture and all the things that could, can change consumer behavior.
Can I add to it?
Yeah.
I just say completely agree. That is, for me, it's not an opposition, right? If you look at the farm level, there's plenty of solutions where you can work on reducing spraying amounts, replace chemicals with biologicals. You can actually do organic crops at a really high efficiency level, like regenerative agriculture, and do that efficiently at large scale. And I think that should be the aim, that we have a more circular production method for our land that does work at scale. So we can sort of get away from monoculture and that sort of intensive land use. Same goes for animal welfare, right? There's no reason why we can't have animal welfare at a large scale, right? While also having a very high amount of plant-based meals in our diet. So I think we should rather work towards how do we make those really good solutions work at scale so they become cost efficient.
Yeah.
And that's the challenge for us.
Yeah.
How do we do it?
100% agree. If we want to solve the food system, we need to solve for the masses, and to solve for the masses, we need to look at where the volumes are and what can be done here.
Wonderful. I think if there's no more questions, then I would like to thank all the panelists on the stage. Thank you so much for sharing your expertise and experience, of course, on this topic. And yeah, everyone have a great tonic, and looking forward to see all of you around the floor. Thanks so much.
Thanks.
All right.
Yeah.